Well, before I go tonight, I think it's time to stop pretending that the criminal justice system delivers justice. Lindy Chamberlain would have endured endless years of jail and vilification if a jumpsuit hadn't been found at a rock in the middle of Australia. Kathleen Folbigg was sentenced to 40 years jail, reduced to 25 on appeal, and suffered 20 years in jail, vilified, demonised, physically attacked, and constantly regarded as, quote, Australia's worst female serial killer. Indeed, in the final summing up to secure Kathleen's conviction, the defence, seeking to prevent the injustice, argued basically that there was no evidence other than hysteria, nothing to show that the mother had physically violated her children in any way, and that the children had died of natural causes, albeit 4 of them. An allegedly brilliant mind representing the prosecution, Mark Tedeschi, then a QC, addressed the jury. This is what he said in part. I can't disprove any of that is, death from natural causes, but one day some piglets might be born, come out of the sow with wings on their back, and the next morning Farmer Joe might look out of a kitchen window and see these piglets flying out of his farm. Kathleen Folbigg had to listen to all of this from a legal hotshot. And when the matter was heard in yet another inquiry, the former New South Wales District Court Judge Reg Blanche, a King's Counsel no less, concluded that the evidence as a whole, including Kathleen's evidence in person, reinforced her guilt. Kathleen Folbigg had to sit through these so-called learned, bewigged individuals successfully alleging that Kathleen smothered each of her children in a fit of rage. The New South Wales opposition leader Mark Speakman is supposed to have a very bright legal mind. He received a petition from world-renowned distinguished scientists on the genetic causes of unexpected death, yet the so-called legal eagle, then New South Wales Attorney General Mark Speakman, in 2018 refused a request to reopen the Folbigg case. As we know, 90 of the world's acclaimed scientists called for the pardon and immediate release of Kathleen, and that has happened. But what happens to those highly paid so-called legal experts who were hopelessly wrong over Lindy Chamberlain, wrong over Kathleen Folbigg, QCs, KCs, politicians allegedly with brilliant minds, all wrong with a capital W? They take the fee and they go on to the next episode of criminal justice. Well, Kathleen got 40 years. The case was finalised last week in the New South Wales Supreme Court in relation to the killing of the gay mathematician Scott Johnson more than 34 years ago. While Dr. Johnson was standing near the cliff edge, the court heard that one Scott Philip White threw a, quote, dangerous and unlawful punch that sent him hurtling backwards off the deadly precipice. The court heard that 27 years old Scott Johnson was especially vulnerable because at the time he was naked, isolated and physically weaker than his assailant. Justice Robert Beach-Jones found that the killer was then 18, quote, cognitively impaired and presumably in a state of panic, unquote. The court heard that young Scott Johnson, whose life was taken, was a genius mathematician who, quote, had everything to live for, and that his death had been the start of, quote, decades-long nightmare of grief and unanswered questions for his family, unquote. I just make the point about further criminal justice. Scott Philip White, found guilty of the death of the 27-year-old Scott Johnson, was sentenced to 9 years in jail with a non-parole period of 6. Kathleen was given 40 years for the murder of her 4 children, which she didn't commit. I hope you can work that out. I can't. It's called the criminal justice system. Well, that's it from me tonight. Thank you for being with us. I hope you are all a little wiser than you were when we started. Don't forget, you can listen to the program, tonight's program, on your podcast app from 6 a.m. tomorrow. Just search Alan Jones and you can hear it all.